ideas. Okay, so this is for the dedicated to the safety and the success of the mission of the soldiers to eradicate the evil enemy, and that they return home safely, the soldiers, and rescue all the hostages, and bring them back to safety. So just two ideas. In this week's Parsha Vayera, the angels come visit Abraham and they to inform him that that Sarah will give birth to a son or to a child. And Abraham, I think, doesn't realize the angels because they're in the human form. And he says he'll give them just a little bit of water and a morsel of bread, just something to eat. But then he goes and prepares a whole feast. And the lesson we learn from this is that in life, and we know close to home, there are certain politicians that say much, like it says in Pirkei Avot, say little and do much. But many politicians say much and do little, and close to home there are such. So he prepared a whole feast, and initially he said he was going to prepare some water, give them some water and bread, and that was testament to his midah of chesed that Avraham had. And the other thing in this parsha is that Lot had to flee the city of Sodom. He was given a chance with his wife and daughters to flee the city of Sodom before it became. There was a sulfur explosion. They were warned not to look back, and the only one that looked back was his wife, who turned into a heap of salt. So Lot escaped the explosion, the explosion, and went into the mountains. And him and his two daughters, or his two daughters, thought they were the only human beings left on earth, and the only way they would be able to repopulate or start repopulating the planet would be to have sexual relations with the father and get themselves pregnant. And that's what they did. And they made him drunk on successive nights, and they had children from those unions. And it wasn't out of lustful thoughts. It was for good intentions. So what the message can be there is sometimes in life one needs to look at the big picture and not judge before you know the full picture what people's full intentions were.
Good. The only thing I don't understand is the word Moav means from my father.
From my father, yes.
I get it. So I understand the discreteness in the situation where what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And the father would say, I don't know, my daughter might have been impregnated before the fateful night. I don't know. And to keep it subtle and hidden. Why boast that you slept with your father? It doesn't, there are reasons, I just don't know what they are. We need to find that out. And there's an expression that a lot of salt is bad for you, for your cardiovascular. And it's a pun on this parsha, a lot of salt. So,
yeah,
he got a heart attack when he turned around. Well, he didn't turn around, when his wife turned into salt. just say. All right, let's get on to the Gemara. I can't do justice. I mean, Kevin just does it fluidly.
No, you actually did a great job. It's just that your audience didn't understand you because you're not clever enough. I think we were just a bit dopey.
I understood him, not me.
I'm a bit dopey. I wasn't concentrating. I was trying to listen. I was listening, but I didn't absorb all of it until after you said it. Then I realized what you said. So that's why we were a bit slow in reacting. All right, sorry. But it was actually very clever and astute. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. That was well done.
So, all right. Where we ended off last night is we were saying that, the first exception where you don't have to listen to the customs collector or the tax collector is when he's not following the mandate of the king by charging exorbitant rates over and above the tax tariff that the king is expecting the collector to get from the populace, and therefore the agreement is broken at that point, because he would not be happy to break the backs of his constituents. Not that he cares necessarily, but he would either want to share in that booty more than what he's being paid, or alternatively, he certainly doesn't want anarchy in his hands. So that opinion is obviously Rav Chanina Bar Kahana, who said in the name of Shmuel, because Shmuel generally said that the law of the kingdom is the law, meaning if you're dealing with a legal tax collector that's charging within the approval ratios of the king, then he's got the full authority of the law in order to collect, but not when some agreement is broken. Then even the money that you meant to give him is not legit, because at the point where the king is not happy, withdraws him as an agent. This is an agency, and all of the money becomes illegal. According to the opinion in the Academy of Rav Yanai, this person didn't even bother to get the authority of the king. And according to the third answer with Rav Ashi, the reference is to a Canaanite customs collector who collects more than the king authorized him to. So, I mean, we said that Canaanite tax collectors are referring to, in general, the idolatrous nations, and any tax collector who exceeds his mandate has broken his agreement with the king and has lost his right under the principle the law of the kingdom is the law to collect even the authorized amount. So you don't have to pay him any. But the Meiri said that at a certain time, all the Rabbonim agreed that even the Jewish tax collector was no better than the Canaanite, and he kept the majority of the profits for himself, and he made an annual stipend to the king, because what would happen is the king would charge him an annual stipend, and as long as the king would get his money no matter what, otherwise upon pain of death. So this person would have to get the money whether he collected it from the king's constituents or not. But it was also open to an abuse, because there were no auditing processes where that money could be calculated. A lot of it was collected under duress, and it was cash. It wasn't as if there were certain transparency measures put into place so the king could see what he was collecting. And during a certain period, all the rabbis, in fact, said that a Jewish tax collector can be guilty of that criminal behavior, no different to a non-Jewish tax collector, because greed, unfortunately, affects all of us. So we're saying, right, now that we're on the subject of the Canaanites, what do we do when you've got a Canaanite who's a fraudster or a robber? And basically, it comes to a case where there's a legal situation in which he wants to extract money from a Jew. So it was taught in a brisa, okay? And when a Jew and a Canaanite robber come for judgment, if you can exonerate the Jew under Jewish law, exonerate him. And say to the robber, this is our law. We're not showing favor to a Jew. These are the standard legal practices, and the Canaanite can check it out. However, if the Jew feels that Canaanite law supports his cause more, and a Jew can exonerate him, or the judges can exonerate him under Canaanite law or non-Jewish law, you say, this is your law, and therefore I'm exonerated. And in other words, Rabbi Yishmael is saying one may employ stratagems against the robber. Okay, so the bottom line is as follows: is as we say, this is not a normal Canaanite. He's either a fraudster or a robber, and the court has reason to believe, either the Jewish court or the non-Jewish court, that he's going to subsequently steal from the defendant or fraudulently take money from him or extract the money from him under dire circumstances. And therefore, Rav Yishmael rules that despite the defendant's liability, the court can take measures to save him from paying by, for example, postponing the case. Why? Because the anticipated theft, even through legal means, will not cause him a net loss. So how can that be a case? We know of cases that people that learn the law in order to put pressure on others. Alternatively, you could get a violent Canaanite, and if the law turns around and says, listen, you can't institute your own justice against this Jew because we're watching you, and correct sort of processes have been put in place that we're monitoring your behavior, and any sort of bad luck that occurs to this individual will not be deemed an accident. And the court has judge the defendant as not owing the money. So what this stops is a person that doesn't want legal recrimination of prison time or corporal punishment to suffer any sort of consequence. So he's going to hold himself back from being this Jewish guy. Now, interestingly enough, we said, look, so that's according to Rav Yishmael. So Rav Yishmael is saying that if you know this guy's up to no good, it's not a normal Canaanite, use the law, whether it's secular law or Jewish law, in order to make sure that this Jewish person doesn't get embroiled in a losing scenario. Now, the Meiri writes that the Brisa concerns only the heathen nations of iniquity. What is it? What do we mean? Is that if you've got biblical Canaanites, they were not regulated by the universal principles of morality and justice. So if you ask most people in America today, what are the Noahide laws? Nobody would know what you're talking about. But if you ask the average American, well, I don't know today, they don't even know if they're boys and girls today, but let's call it 5 years ago. What are the things that are illegal? We say that to commit adultery, unfortunately, it doesn't seem as illegal today. But in any normal society, it's a civil case. Certain societies in the 50s, it was a criminal case. Even certain forms of homosexuality were criminal cases. But be that as it may, to commit adultery, one can certainly lose their assets if one can legally prove their spouse has been shown to have a history of infidelity, okay, especially in terms of custody, etc., etc. So murder, sexual immorality, theft, fraudulent behavior, all of these things, setting up courts of law, being cruel to animals, tearing flesh from a living animal, etc., etc. These are standard prohibitions. So what we are saying is, even if the non-Jewish nations adhere to the Noahide laws, they are treated the same as Jews, in the sense that they are regulated by morality and justice. And therefore, any member of a civilized nation that recognizes Hashem, even if its religion is slightly different, but they've got some recognition of divine accountability before a God, they've got to be treated exactly as a Jew in all financial dealings, without any discrimination. The issue here is a biblical Canaanite or other nations that do not adhere to morality. We know in the olden times, there were many nations that settled their disputes with murder. You don't have to go that far back. There was it was called the Count of Monte Cristo, where in France, like 150, 200 years ago, that if somebody's honor was slighted, they would be challenged to a duel, and you could shish kebab them and not get the death penalty, by the way. So killing was a way to sort out certain troublesome neighbors. You also had cases of nations that committed, especially during Roman times, all sorts of orgies. Theft was prolific, as generally the stronger guy took from the weaker guy. And this wasn't always illegal. So it depends on the moral compass and the recognition of God by how you treat somebody in a legal case, whether they're Jewish or non-Jewish. So if you're dealing with a Gentile that sues a Jew in a Jewish court, the judges can't deviate a hair's breadth from halachic Jewish law, regardless of the circumstances. They're treated fairly. So the Brisa says that this particular Gemara's discussion were limited to the area of the Talmud. It doesn't have any practical application nowadays. It's only when you're dealing with, firstly, not just a normal Canaanite, but a Canaanite that doesn't adhere to any ethical practice of fairness. But it goes further than that. So if you're dealing, according to Rav Yishmael, that whether it's a Jewish or non-Jewish course, stratagems to stop somebody from being fraudulently taken advantage of, you can employ them. But Rabbi Akiva states that you cannot employ any stratagems against the robber, even if he's in the wrong, on account of the sanctification of the divine name. What do we mean? We said Kiddush Hashem, which means the sanctification of Hashem's name makes a difference to the case. Meaning, if the courts act in a way that leads the plaintiff to think that he's being treated unfairly, the judges will have committed the cardinal sin of desecrating Hashem's name. Therefore, the defendant is liable under Jewish and Canaanite law. They've got to rule against him and compel this Jewish person to pay, even if he's being taken advantage of by this person that's manipulating the law, because that still is the facet of the law. And the halacha follows Rabbi Akiva, not Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael doesn't have a problem using stratagems because he says that everybody knows this particular plaintiff is a criminal and deserves such treatment. But Rabbi Akiva maintains that even in this case, you've got to be scrupulously careful to make sure that any perception on the part of the plaintiff or his compatriots, his family, the community at large, knows that he's being treated properly and it constitutes Kiddush Hashem, a sanctification of the divine name. Now, Kevin said yesterday quite clearly that idolatry were one of the things that one has to give up their life rather than commit. One of the sins one has to give up their life rather than commit. That's one of the three cardinal ones. The second cardinal one, and these are in no particular order as far as I know, is murder. One cannot murder in order to save oneself. This is not a case of self-defense. If somebody's running after you to kill you, or you see some person A running after person B to kill him, you can maim person A to stop him attacking person B, even if you're the third party and it's not your direct offense. And if he gets killed, he gets killed, but try and avoid that. But we talk about a case where we even said an extreme example yesterday, where the leader of the generation, a gun is held to his head, and they say to him, listen, you're leading the Jewish people, there's this Jewish drug addict, you kill him and then we'll save you. He's not allowed to, because we don't know from him who will come. It could be the Mashiach that would come from him because he's a Yisrael and his kids could become righteous, his grandkids could carry the line of Mashiach, he could do a turnaround in his life. It could be that he doesn't achieve much and the tzaddik achieves much more, but it's not for man to make that judgment call. He can't actively kill to save his life. And the other third one where one is meant to give up their life is to avoid sexual morality like adultery, etc., etc. So, as far as that's concerned, one has to be, according to Rabbeinu Bachya, even more careful. Because if you've got two Jews and one Jew steals from another Jew, you'll put it down to a character flaw. According to Rabbeinu Bachya, if a Jew steals from a non-Jew, he'll put it down to the fact that the Jewish religion itself has its shortcomings and that you can treat non-Jewish people differently, which you cannot. So it's much more of a desecration for a Jew to steal from a non-Jew than from a Jew. However, there is also an issue, is that if a frum Jew steals from a secular Jew, and he says, is this what Torah has brought? Then in itself is very, very severe. Not even Yom Kippur can atone for this. It's actually when the person dies, only then their death atones for the Chilul Hashem, providing they've also made a proper teshuvah. Okay, so it's that serious. Now, in this present brisa, you must know Rabbi Akiva forbids even behavior that would otherwise be permitted. And this is what you guys have to bear in mind. What Rav Yishmael is saying is not illegal. He's saying, this person is up to no good. He's using the law to damage this Jewish person in court by using the law to fraudulently extract money from him. So, according to Rav Yishmael, you can use stratagems in order to use the law to protect this person. We're not talking about a normal Canaanite. We talk about somebody that is a biblical Canaanite and doesn't hold by laws of restraint of the Torah at all, not even the 7 hard laws. So please bear in mind that Rabbi Akiva only forbids behavior that would otherwise be permitted because it would lead to a desecration of the divine name. Rav Yishmael is correct that you can circumvent it. It's only because of that factor. So anyone who acts towards a Jew or a non-Jew in a manner that is perceived as unjust or improper, that could desecrate the name, even if the deed in question is not an actual transgression, the duty is to avoid such conduct, and it's especially incumbent upon the courts that are seen as Jewish courts or a pious Jew, okay? Because they judge to a higher standard. It's based on the Gemara in Yoma 86a. And we're also saying there's subtleties here. What are the subtleties? If somebody is seen as a Talmud Chochem and they buy products, I don't mean a byproduct. A byproduct comes from a main product. I mean to purchase a product, okay? Not a byproduct of laziness is gaining fat. I mean to purchase products. So what we are saying is one of the, if you buy merchandise and you don't pay immediately, or you don't speak to people pleasantly, Kevin's mentioned this again and again in the droshes that he's given us. And I think this is where what Kevin teaches us helps us, is because if you don't pay your staff on time, if you don't pay your suppliers on time, if you don't greet people with a cheerful countenance and you've got a surly expression on your face, or if you don't receive people with joy or pleasantly, in that particular case, it's a desecration of God's name if you are seen as religious, because you're held to a higher standard. Is that fair or is that not fair? Well, one doesn't have to put themselves in jeopardy, meaning, okay, so if somebody insults you, you don't have to respond in the same tone. You could just, you can have a bit of restraint, but you don't have to bend over backwards. And we're going to learn this in the Gemara the next session, where just because somebody knows you're from Jew, you've got to disadvantage yourself because they're going to think badly. You know, you can be strict and conduct your business affairs honestly and faithfully and work to just measures, etc. And you don't have to bow and curtail just to see what people think of you. But you've got to keep your commitments. You've got to follow through. What you say, you've got to do. Okay? And the Torah uses something very interesting. And Rav Schottenstein says to this, be very disciplined with yourself and give other people the benefit of the doubt. Don't give mussar to other people, but give yourself mussar. In other words, be much more constrained and stringent upon yourself in terms of your divine conduct than you are to other people. And you've got to try and see if you are a little bit more generous of spirit to others than yourself. However, there are caveats to this. And one of the caveats to this is that if somebody steals from you once, shame on them. If somebody steals from you twice, shame on you. I'm telling you, guys. If you're going to be a moron and set yourself up for failure, or if somebody's toxic for you, Kevin is a tzaddik. And what happens with Kevin is he gets a lot of mentally ill people that he's friendly with. Why? Because he tolerates that nonsense. Whereas Gavin and I have got a less tolerance, and we say to him, listen, pal, take a hike. I don't want to see you. No, I'm saying you're a tzaddik in that way. But what you have to do is conserve your energy and say to him, listen, my dear friend, you're being toxic. If you can't control your mental illness, please stay away from me, please.
So, or you can outsource that function to me. I'm quite happy to take care of it for you. But the problem is it's a bit of a logistics problem. Otherwise, I would take care of it. If you have any problems locally, Kevin, with any of your mates, you want to get rid of them, I'm happy to help you out.
Exactly. Yeah. So there is one part of the Gemara I want to just cover quickly. Is that the verse teaches that one may not pull him like, okay, so we're teaching, there's one principle here. I'm going to quickly see if we can cover a little bit of ground. Now, we are dealing with an issue. I just don't know whether, how long have we got, guys? We got like what, 10 minutes or what have we got?
Yeah.
At least 12 minutes. The clock hasn't come up yet.
All right. I just checked. He sent the link at, yeah. 12 minutes, yeah.
All All right, so let me just tell you what I'm thinking. Oh my gosh, this cat's back. Yeah, I know. I know, the cat. Just give me a second. No, that food's not for you. Guys, just give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So we're going to discuss some contradictions here. So there's an internal contradiction in the teachings of Rabbi Akiva. Now, even according to Rabbi Akiva, the primary reason for prohibiting stratagems is sanctification of Hashem's divine name. But if there would be no issue of the sanctification of the name, we would approach this Canaanite robber or fraudster with stratagems. But the question arises, is robbing a Canaanite permitted in Rabbi Akiva's opinion? Okay. In other words, is withholding payment from someone considered tantamount to stealing from him? That's number one. Okay. Furthermore, is stealing from a robber also considered stealing? Okay. But if it was not for the issue of desecrating the divine name, Rabbi Akiva would have let the Jewish defendant withhold payment from the Canaanite robber who is suing him, because at the end of the day, this Canaanite is not a normal Canaanite. He doesn't adhere to any sort of moral compass. So are we then to infer that, according to Rabbi Akiva, that there's no specific biblical prohibition derisa against stealing from a Canaanite? Now, the Gemara says, look, it was taught contrary in a brisa that Rabbi Shimon said this law was expounded by Rabbi Akiva when he came from Zephirin. From where do we know that robbing a Canaanite is prohibited? For the Torah states in the passage about a Jew who sold himself as a servant to the Canaanite. And where is that? It's in Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 25, verse 48. And what's that discussion? Is after he's been sold, he shall have a redemption. And what does that mean? One of his brothers, one of his Jewish brothers, has to redeem him. And that is that the servant's relatives or the court shall purchase his freedom from the Canaanite. So when a Jew sells himself to a Gentile, maybe impoverished to the degree that he decides that it's better to have food and a roof over his head because he's bordering towards starvation, then in that particular case, he owes the Gentile money. The Chumash gives his relatives the legal right to emancipate their kin by paying the Gentile for the debt for the remaining years of his term. So maybe this Jew owes this Gentile about 80,000 rand. He gets indentured servitude. And the Chumash itself says that if his relatives want to redeem him, they have to pay the 80,000 rand to the Gentile. Otherwise, he has to reserve the remaining years of his term for labor at a certain calculated fee to pay back the debt. Now, the Gemara in Kedushin 21b derives that the relatives are actually guys obligated to exercise this right in order to prevent the servant from becoming lost amongst the Gentile culture and abandoning his Jewish faith, because we see many cases where Jews became slaves to Gentiles, and then they fell in love with the shiksa, and before you knew it, they kind of became accustomed to non-Jewish culture, which in fact possesses a heck of a danger. Okay, so we're dealing with a case here that this teaches a different principle, that you can't pull a Jewish slave out of the Canaanite possession and let him escape. In other words, there are two choices, guys. Either you decide to, it's not, how do I say this? You either pay the debt, this Jew owes this Canaanite 80,000 rand. He's now got indentured servitude, let's just say for 8 months, because he's worth 10,000 rand a month salary. So the family's got two choices. They either pay for him and redeem the debt, or they can, exactly as Gavin says, go have a reconnaissance mission and have a covert operation and kidnap him from the Canaanite home. But the Torah says you can't. You can't pull him out of the Canaanite possession and let him escape. You have to pay the Canaanite for the servant's freedom. Why? Because it uses the term redemption by paying the master, because the Torah forbids the court or the servant's relatives to take the servant from the Canaanite master in any manner. So that's evidence from the fact that the Torah prohibits a Jew to steal from a non-Jew, even if the latter worships idols. So this is going further. It's saying that this person is an idol worshipper. We're not even talking about somebody that adheres to the mitzvahs. But we need a verse to teach us. In Leviticus chapter 19, verse 13, why? Because you would say you would not withhold payment from your fellow, and you shall not rob. And if you say your fellow, it means your fellow Jew. So we actually need added verses from 6 to 11 for us to tell us that, because otherwise you'd think you only have to pay your fellow and not withhold payment. What about a non-Jew? Because his fellow refers to a Jew. So robbing a Canaanite or any other non-Jew is inherently forbidden, whether it leads to a desecration of Hashem's name or not. And Rabbi Akiva holds by this problem. That's why there's a discrepancy. So the prohibition applies even if the non-Jew is physically persecuting the Jew. I don't mean to his danger, but obviously, certainly when there's a monetary, when he poses only a monetary threat. So what we're saying is, bottom line is that the Jew became indentured as a servant because he failed to pay his debt. You can't spring him out of the custody of a Canaanite if there's money owed. However, this is what you've got to bear in mind, is that it says, now it might have been thought that since you have to pay for the servant's freedom, you can act foolishly and even allow the Canaanite master to overcharge or dictate terms in terms of what that Jewish servant is worth. So the Torah states, he shall make a reckoning with this purchaser. Okay? And that's in Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 25, verse 50. And what does that mean? Is that he shall be exact with this purchaser, meaning that if there's only a debt outstanding of 80,000 rand, and suddenly this Canaanite says he wants 200,000 rand, you say, no, I'm not giving you that. I'm giving you X amount. And obviously, if the Jew's in danger of losing his life or whatever, you can spring him out. And then after the fact, pay the 80,000. Doesn't give you a reason to break what the value is. But you certainly can't let him dictate terms. Do you get what I'm saying? And, all right. Now, just bearing in mind that there are different considerations, because this verse speaks of Canaanites who live under Jewish jurisdiction, and that the Canaanite master must let the servant free go in the Yovel year, which would not be applicable unless he's under the authority of the Jewish court. So the Torah prohibits stealing from a Canaanite, even if he's living under Jewish rule, and certainly if he's living under non-Jewish rule. And the one thing also to bear in mind is, even if he's an idol worshipper, you can't steal from him. But if he adheres to no laws whatsoever, and he's going to do thief shenanigans, at that point you don't owe him anything because he's not honest. But if he's honest, even if he's an idol worshipper and you owe money, pay him the money. Pay him what you owe for this Jew that got himself in debt. If he's not prepared to release that Jew and he wants exorbitant amounts like the guy's a Hamas Arab, you take the Jew out and you pay what you owe. You keep your debts thing. If it's a situation like war or loss of life, I'm sure you can get away with things. I don't know. All right, guys, I think we're done. I hope you keep well.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you can. There is one thing you can steal from those oaks. You can steal the idols.
So it's interesting that we're not allowed to be in possession of idols.
So we can't even touch it.
No, I don't think you can. I don't think you can take possession of it. You can burn them.
But in the next sorry, carry on, Arthur.
Yeah, what happens if your name is Billy Idol? Then what do you do?
Can you listen to his music, Arthur?
You can't be an American Idol. I mean, those things are
Then
gone.
Arthur,
Kevin,
it can
you
go
were
much
saying-
further than that. Talking about music.
Hang on,
Sorry,
Kev. You were
Damon.
saying something important
But
about
I
the
just know
passion.
something.
Yeah, but let it.
Dude,
I'll speak to. Yes, in the next week's parasha, when Yaakov selects Rivka as a wife, who is her father? Who is Rivka's father?
Look what happened to Rivka for taking her father's idol.
She took she took her father's idols away, and she
Laban,
sat on them.
Laban,
He couldn't find them. What was his name,
Laban,
Gavin?
Laban.
Lavan, yes. And they had like magical.
No. So what ended up happening was Yaakov is a tzaddik. Whatever his words are comes true. And he said, if the person has stolen your idol amongst my family, they shall shorten their life or lose their life. And she died early. Didn't realize she hid it. It's not a good idea to take it. Really.
Even though it's because it's someone's property.
No, not because it's property. We can't touch idols.
Because he was in possession of it.
We can't touch idols. We have to burn and not take benefit or not take possession. Like chametz, you don't take it. You burn it.
Arthur.
Okay. Here comes another one. What is the